He's a little crook.
Yeah, he's a little crook.
A little crooksy daisy, as we say, in the podcasting business industry.
Welcome to NOCLIP. I'm Chad Ruthermans.
And I'm Andy Kinnick.
And today, we're going to be talking about Ghost Trick Phantom Detective, which was a game that was developed by Capcom, published by Capcom, and released in 2010 on the Nintendo DS. And iOS. So, Ghost Trick is, by most measurements, like an adventure game. Mm-hmm. That's how I would describe it. It's broken into discrete puzzles, in a way that a lot of adventure games kind of are. Mm-hmm. But it is a game that also has just like one metric fuck ton of text in it. So it definitely has sort of like that Danganronpa sort of vibe to it. I believe this predates all Danganronpa games, though. That comparison was mostly for my own frame of reference, but that's how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, it's from the same director as Phoenix Wright, and you can tell. Yeah, he has a sensibility that is very easy to pick up on, I think. And and so it leans visual novel. It's pretty heavily integrated in there. It feels like a 50-50 split almost. Mm-hmm. But now I heard this described as an evolution of like the point and click genre, which I thought was a pretty good observation because I didn't even think of it that way while I was playing it, but I think that is absolutely right. Okay, so
we should rename the genre to point and trick, right?
Ooh, yeah, there it is.
That's yep. And all right, thank you for listening. But no, I actually don't disagree with that. It is like it's because it's a lot of environment interaction in the puzzle solving. This does away with things like inventory management, like all the item collection, which I don't know how many point and click adventure games you have played, dear listeners, but that to me feels like a good thing to exclude to some extent. Though I think the streamlining of the puzzles just generally is probably what makes this more enjoyable than a lot of those old point and clicks are. Mm-hmm. Whereas like probably the most egregious offender is like pixel hunting, which this also doesn't really have, but it is closer to that because you are just sort of like flying around looking for shit that you can interact with a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's got like a more explicit mechanical interaction as compared to a point and click, which it benefits from a lot, I think, if you're directly comparing the two things.
Right. So in Ghost Trick, in order to get to all of that, we should probably mention why the puzzles work the way they do, at least the way that it is set out in the narrative of this game, which the game takes its own narrative very, very seriously, like not in as much as it's a serious narrative, but the game is very much about its story and less about the mechanical interaction like in a typical puzzle type game. In this game, you play as Sissel, which is how I've been pronouncing it, and I assume is correct because it rhymes with missile, who is killed at the beginning of the game, and your spirit then has this ability to sort of jump between objects and manipulate them. And also key to the plot, you have the ability to roll back time to 4 minutes before someone is dead, but only if that person died within the last day, and also you will cease to exist at the end of the night. Now, all narrative nonsense aside from all the things that lead into that and what are those rules actually about, the number of rules in this definitely made me think about other like Japanese media that we've talked about or watched or experienced, things like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Death Note, as well as 999 and Danganronpa, like this very rules heavy sort of thing. But it's obviously laid out that way so that your so the puzzles work the way that they do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the setup is really novel, and I really liked the way that this game begins.
Yeah, it's a really clever setup, and I tend to like this sort of rules based universe. Like, I think that's one of the best practices in fiction is like establish a universe with clear rules and stay within them. Um, so yeah, there is like a subgenre of like anime and in games related stuff that leans puts a big emphasis on that stuff. Um, but yeah, so the way that it's all presented to you, I think, is really good. Like the visual presentation of this is great, and we'll get more into that as we go. But like
Yeah.
the way that the tutorial's laid out, and like just the way that I'm just saying the same thing over and over again, but just the way it's all presented to you is just really effective.
Well, to talk to the to let's try that one again. To speak to the tutorial and layouts conveniently, the game is I mean, it's broken into several different parts as far as like what you're actually doing at any given time, but I think most people would describe the two predominant ones are your puzzle solving and then your like navigation, because there's this element to it where because you can only move between objects that are a set distance apart or closer, it means that just getting from one point to another is like a traversal challenge in itself, and that allows the game to have both the timed puzzle solving aspects and the like more free form, like try everything, do all the stuff, you don't have a time limit version of it.
Yeah, I think that's the smartest thing in the design is like the environmental traversal parts are like a subtle organic kind of tutorial or like lubing up for lack of a better term for the puzzle sections.
Yes,
Cause
a lack of there was
no better
definitely
word.
no none.
Okay, I just wanted to use that word. But yeah, so you get to see all the tools you have at your disposal in advance and see how they work, and in the moment you don't even really think of it that way, and I think that's like what makes it a really nice piece of design.
Yeah, I do agree with that, actually. That was what I was going to bring up, but you aptly swooped in
Haha.
to take the point before I could bring it up, is that there are just two different kinds of the traversal. There's the one where you're literally going from point A to point B, and then there are the ones where you have to move around in an area and it previews all of the different things. And then that is just really smart design. It's like one of those things that I didn't really notice was happening until pretty late in the game. It was like around the prison part where I realized like how much time they spend setting up each individual environment so that you can like learn how everything works before you go for it.
Yeah, it's more noticeable the bigger the area.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're thinking that to yourself, like, oh, I got to figure out like where everything is so I can like do stuff quick.
Mm-hmm. And see, we're on this like sort of mechanical discussion about all these puzzle solving elements and the traversal, and I don't want to jump like super far into like the game's plot where things start to change up, but I really want to drive home how this particular method of movement, like the mechanics that are in this game, are kind of its biggest strength, because there are tons of games that I've played, and I'm sure ones that I think Bob Is You is a great example if you listen to that episode, where puzzle games in particular love to get you accustomed to a tool set, and then the later into the game you are, they add new things to it, and the new tools that you have often require a learning curve of their own, and the fact that missile gets added to your move, or like your set both in movement and in ability, feels to me like purely additive. Like I think it's one of the few times that I feel like there were no hiccups it just was a bonus, and it felt like they properly tutorialized it and everything. Like, it's one of the best implementations of like new mechanics in a puzzle game that I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think it's because it's simpler than what you can already do. Like, it's really easy to understand given the knowledge base you already have from playing the game once you get it. Yeah, the only thing with that is I think they could have introduced it a little earlier. Because it felt like you didn't get to use it very much, and it seemed like it had a lot of potential.
That is potentially true. I think the big thing for me as to why I think the missile power doesn't get introduced earlier is because they introduce a lot of additional rules, of course, to limit its like functionality to some extent. Like, the fact that you can only swap things that are the same shape means that there has to be a lot of very intentional design to make sure that things aren't confusing, and also that they include things that are not because that's the biggest problem with the sections where you do have missile, is that the things that you can swap often feel like they're really obvious. It's like, this thing is obviously here so that you can swap it with something else later. I felt a little bit cheated in the segment where you swap the bullet with the knit cap, because I just did that. Like, it just happened on my first go through, and I didn't really get to think it out. It was just the only option that I had, and so it didn't feel super satisfying.
Yeah, for me, I had to do that over again because I hadn't knocked the hat. I hadn't knocked the hat off, and the knit cap just falls to the ground and is no longer the right shape. So I had to do it over, which I think is what they want to happen. Like, it's more of like a moment when it doesn't work out. You're like, I need to move the hard hat first.
The hat falls into place, right?
Yeah, no, if you just kind of fall into doing that, I guess it would be less satisfying.
Fair. Yeah.
No, but I actually thought when it was fallen down and in like it looked more like a bullet shape there. Oh. So like, I actually thought that you needed to make it into that shape and not like the more half circle shape.
I actually thought that the in that same puzzle, like, which we're just going to talk about, I guess, that the eventual solution was going to be to swap the bullet with the hat, or with the hard hat, and that like the inertial velocity of the hat was somehow going to slow it down, and I was just chalking it up to like cartoon logic. I actually appreciate a lot the fact that it was the different hat was the correct solution, but that's like the puzzle where they introduce you to those mechanics. Well, second puzzle, but like, you're like, it's the one where they give you like free reign.
And I like the idea of stopping the bullet in midair.
Yeah, no, it was cool. Yeah. I did like it, and it played well narratively. I thought it was this game is funny on occasion, and that was one of the more amusing moments for me, is when you swap the bullet and he gets hit in the face with the hat and then like just plays dead. I guess it's weird. But yeah, so I do like the missile mechanics, like the swapping mechanics, and I like your own mechanics. So they bleed together really well, and I was a little terrified that like the very last mission they were going to also add, I don't remember his name. The real...
It's like Yomiel or something.
Yeah, Yomiel or whatever.
Or something like that.
Yeah, I thought they were going to add his powers.
I actually was disappointed that they didn't. Because it basically was like, hey, he's going to be there too, and to use his powers, and then he doesn't until the very last thing, and it's in a cutscene, so... set up expectations, etc.
That's fair. I agree that there was like a missed element of like completion to it, where you feel like you should be able to have all three or whatever. But I also feel like it would have inevitably ended with you feeling like they missed some kind of opportunity to have more with it.
Yeah, and it would have made things way more complicated, because his power is to manipulate living things.
Right.
Because the cat shows up, and in that part, at the very beginning, and I'm like, oh, he's gonna have to manipulate the cat to do something, and et cetera, and no.
No.
So yeah, I thought that was a little weird.
Yeah. I do want to talk about that damn cat, but I feel like
it's too early.
Yeah, our split should definitely be more on the mechanical side right now.
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, so that was that whole last mission, like, it didn't feel like a super hard kind of last mission, so I could see them potentially doing like adding an additional step to it, but I don't know. I like how it ended up, in all honesty. How did you find... I thought that getting used to this game in the early stages was, like, pretty complicated. Like, I wasn't able to super grasp how to, like, plan ahead to solve things in the first, like, 3 or 4 chapters, and mostly just kind of, like, moved around and did all the shit that I could, and it would eventually work.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that's what they want you to do.
Okay.
Yeah, I took to this pretty smoothly and found it to generally be pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, like, I actually kind of wish it would have had a little bit more of a difficulty curve, and that the mechanics would have gotten fleshed out a little bit more. But as it is, I thought it was like a really enjoyable, like, no hiccups kind of experience.
Yeah. I actually do agree with that, in that I thought that the game was not too difficult. I just thought that as far as the puzzle solving goes, there's puzzle solving and then there's like puzzle doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like it weighted pretty heavily on the doing stuff. Like, I don't want to use the phrase trial and error because, like, there's very little error.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a lot of times if you try something...
Experimentation.
Yeah, it more or less is just the correct thing to do.
Yeah, that felt really intentional to me. Mm-hmm. Like, I think they thought this was a unique enough concept that they designed the early stuff to be more like you messing around with things to figure out just, like, the ins and outs of how the game worked. So, I don't know. I thought that seemed like what was supposed to be happening. And it, like, ramps up as it goes, but not quite enough to my liking.
Yeah. It could have gotten a lot more complicated. I don't know how much I would have appreciated that, considering on previous episodes we've talked about how quickly I can just sort of, like, zone out of a puzzle game when it gets, like, way too much.
Yeah, I thought, like, the iteration time on this was pretty good, though.
Mm-hmm.
But because, like, there's the one mission where the minister guy or whatever has the heart attack.
Yeah.
And you have to do a whole series of things to, like, knock the medicine bottle back up onto his table. And, like, that took me, like, 4 or 5 different times, like, messing with stuff. Like, I felt like I fell into every pitfall they set up.
Right.
Where I would do a thing, and I was like, oh, wait, I needed to do that after this, and then I have to rewind it again, you know. And I actually, even though it felt a little gotcha, like, you can feel, like, the designer being like, haha, you did what I thought you would do. Like, it felt enjoyable to work through that. So I wouldn't have mind if they, like, cranked up the difficulty a little, because it felt fun to work through to me.
Yeah, I think that puzzle in specific was more of what I thought this game was going to be from the outset. Because in that particular one, and rarely at any other point in the game, you are really constructing, like, a Rube Goldberg device to attempt to solve this problem, because you try all the different stuff, and the game's pretty heavy-handed when it comes to hints. Like, it likes to flash up the, like, dialogue bubbles and stuff pretty often. And once you get sort of, like, an idea of what everything in the room does, then what you realize is that you have to, like, knock this thing down to make a little seesaw, land this thing on the other side, then swap it back over to the other side, drop a thing on the thing, and then it flies across the room. And it's, like, this whole, like, 5-step process to get it all put together and working. And that was both one of my favorite design puzzles, and also probably my biggest pain point, because the number of things that I had to remember meant that I had to keep restarting at the fate change over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And that just gets like, I mean, obviously, me aside, it's not a significant amount of time. Like, your time loss is probably like 30 seconds or so.
Yeah, I mean, in your defense, I don't think it's like the time necessarily so much as it's like a game feel thing, because in that one you go back and then you have to wait for the guy to start the heart attack again, and like the papers to shoot up and to fly across the room, and that they should have started you after that.
Right. And also every time that you jump to the medicine bottle, it puts a spotlight on it.
And it says like whatever the text is there.
Yeah. So it definitely has, and I mean, the game came out in 2010 and was a DS game. And from my experience of playing games on the DS in 2010, it's not really like, I feel like this is just that wasn't a consideration as much in development.
No.
Like, people's time in, like, those minute scale sort of things. And so I don't hold it completely against the game for making me sit through the dialogue over and over again, but it was kind of irritating. I didn't love it. And that really is, I have very little negative to say about this game, all things considered, and that is one of my like 2 or 3 complaints, is that it did replay animations that you couldn't skip, even though the dialogue you can skip. So you end up with these awkward sequences where you have like the fast forwarding dialogue, and then this like extended animation plays out. And then a bunch of real fast dialogue, and then you can play again. It just seems like counterintuitive.
Yeah. I don't know how like nitty gritty that kind of stuff gets. Like with how, because there aren't really cutscenes in this. I think it's all in engine.
Yeah.
And I don't know how well you'd be able to like speed that stuff up and how it's programmed and et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah,
who knows?
Checkpoint placement probably is like the best actual solution for this. Like if this game is set up to run on sort of like a linear scale where all the animations have to play out in the same time, or else like something gets fucky, then most likely if they just placed the checkpoint when you were on the other side of the room, it would have saved. So it was saving like 3-4 minutes.
Yeah.
I swear to you, 3 minutes before I die, I'm gonna be like, I'd be here for another 3 if it wasn't for those goddamn medicine bottles.
I mean, you would have just spent it on something else, so
yeah.
I caught you.
Trying to think of what to spin that into, and I was going to go for puzzle design, which feels a little broad.
Well, I have something just off the back of that last conversation. I really liked the puzzles. Like, it felt like they started pushing into this kind of space like 2/3 of the way in, and then they kind of shift to like narrative focus. But I like there's also the sequence with, I think it's the one with the bullet, where you swap the bullet for the hat, is you have to go into the basement. Like, puzzles that incorporate multiple rooms, like also the jail, and like having to travel between different places. I really liked that stuff.
Yeah.
And I wanted that developed more.
I don't blame you. The fact that this game will never get a sequel means that we probably won't ever see.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
But hashtag justice for Ghost Trick.
There was definitely, in that sequence, not only was there the part where you have to jump down to the basement, but there's also the part where you have to go back into time multiple times.
Oh, yeah.
Which is set up...
A dream within a dream.
A dream within a dream. Ghostception, etc., etc.
A death within a death.
And you do that in that one, and it is like, it acts as setup for when you do it later as the finale of the game. But I feel like there were a billion design space possibilities for that the game felt like it was... It felt like it was stuff that would be saved for a sequel.
And there was the part in that one where was my favorite thing they did with the missile power is that you had to manipulate the shape of something to like knock it on its side to change its shape. It's similar to the hat, but so like to make it the same shape as the lid, to make it the same shape as the door, so you could swap them. And it's just like that stuff's really cool. Like I just feel like there's a lot of stuff you can play with there, and yeah, it seems like prime like sequel fodder there.
Yeah, I remember I just listened to this episode for a specific reason that I'm now blanking on, but when we talked about Monument Valley, one of the things that we jumped to a whole bunch of times is they released that expansion pack where it felt like they took the things that were built upon in the first game and really sort of like built them out into what their eventual versions could have been. And I think that's true in this game as well. This game definitely has room for mastery. Like, you can see it in your own progress. Like, I think in the last 4 chapters, I had to restart a puzzle 1 time. And that was me just, like, getting it. Like, I got locked and loaded on fucking Ghost Trick somehow.
I think it gets easier in the latter half, or the last third as well.
I mean, I like that you shit on my accomplishments, but no.
I mean, also you're super smart.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. But I felt like taking that exact, like, learning curve where once you hit the ceiling, or close to it, however, like, your particular trajectory goes, there's definitely a lot of room for it to go, and it just kind of doesn't go there.
Yeah, I would love this to get like at least the like the Phoenix Wright treatment and like do a HD version. #perfect for the Switch.
Yeah.
So it doesn't even take advantage of the 2 screens that much.
No, for the most part, the top screen just says Ghost Trick.
Yeah, and it'll display some like the info on the top, but I don't think that's anything you could just map to one screen.
Yeah, it could just be like a HUD element.
Yeah.
The only thing, this is such a dumb complaint, and not one of the things that I want to levy against it, but the game operates with a control scheme that is like completely control nub agnostic. It doesn't care what you're using, so you can control it with the D-pad or with the analog stick, or with the touchscreen.
Yeah, if you're on a 3DS.
If you're on a 3DS. Right, which has a control stick.
Yeah.
But
this is why I was surprised when you brought up trying to control the game with the C-stick, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't even considered it, because it was an original DS game.
I cannot, for the life of me, use a D-pad on a 3DS, or at least on the 3DS XL, because the position of it means that my thumb has to be at like a 90-degree angle at all times. So it's super awkward for me. But it works great in my opinion. Like, after I got used to it, using the circle pad works amazingly for Sissel, but then once you have Missile, it's impossible to navigate. I just had to use the touchscreen for it.
I feel similarly about Missile. I had to use the stylus for that, but I tried the circle pad and thought it felt like complete ass to use. Like, the sensitivity was weird, but I liked using the D-pad a lot.
Okay. Yeah, and it gives, like, more of a... Using, like, the directional buttons as opposed to the touchscreen gives, like, a more... It feels like you have more momentum, because you can, like, zip between things.
Yeah, and it has that... I don't know if I want to call it an issue, but it has that thing that a lot of DS games have, where it's like... I feel like as a developer, you feel like you have to put all your eggs in one basket, and like control it with buttons or control it with the stylus, because it feels bad to switch.
Yeah.
And like I would try, because like I don't like skipping through, or like, you know, advancing through dialogue by tapping the screen. Like, something about that feels really tedious.
Yeah.
So like I would enjoy moving it with the stylus to play. But then when it would go into narrative stuff, I would want to switch back to the buttons.
Right.
And like going back and forth just doesn't feel good.
Yeah, playing... that's why I've gone through so many styluses
Because you lose them.
Well, no, because I have an oral fixation.
Oh, you chew on them.
Whenever it would be a game that you play with the stylus, and then you would switch to buttons for something, I would always put the stylus in my mouth like a fucking baby.
I always put it behind my ear. And
see,
then that's
smart.
how I would lose it sometimes because I'd forget it was there.
And it would fall out, yeah. Mine, if you break the... there's like, on the stylus, this is some in-depth stylus discussion. If you look at a DS stylus, it has like a little thin bar, a tiny gap, and then the thicker like actual body of it on the top end where it like latches in. If you break or deform that little tiny bar, it just will fall out of the DS. Yeah, so that's like what happens with all of mine, because I'll end up accidentally like biting through them. But yeah, so that's why I tried to use the analog stick where I could in this game.
Yeah, I also ended up using the buttons and the D-pad, so... I like that the both options are there, but it just always makes me think about, like, how actually successful, like, the DS's touch controls really were.
Yeah.
Because, like, unless it was a game that was designed only to use them, I didn't use them.
Well, I mean, if we want to talk about what a fool I am, when I was in high school, or junior high, Jesus, it's been a while.
I think the DS would have come out, like, early high school for us, like maybe the very, very tail end of junior high.
Yeah. Or middle school for people who live in regular places.
That's just what they call it here now as well.
Oh, wow. But when
we're so old.
We're ancient. When we were youngins, though, and the DS came out, I remember looking at it and being like, how are you going to use a stylus and buttons at the same time? It's literally impossible. And that was my reasoning for buying a PSP. Which, in my defense, had like 4 good games. And I did like those. But then eventually I got a DS and realized that the library was just like fucking absurd.
The PSP was ahead of the curve in being a media device, though.
True.
There was actual value to the PSP, unlike the Vita. But anyways, defending young you.
Yeah. Well, no, I was dunking on young me for being stupid and thinking that a PSP was going to be a better purchasing decision than a DS. But yeah, and this is a game that was released on the DS, and I didn't know about it at all, and now I'm sad. But yeah, on the point that we were actually talking about originally, I think that it is good if you aren't going to use those buttons and sticks for anything else, so you just go ahead and map the movement controls onto them as well. I feel like several modern games have had this issue as well, where they primarily focus on a particular control method, and then the optional other control method, it just goes unused, and you can't even like activate it and turn it on.
I think what would fix it for me is like an auto scroll for the text.
Oh yeah,
which is something that I've seen in a lot of more modern like JRPGs. And it's a thing, like, I don't know when that became a thing, but I don't think that was really anything I ever saw.
Yeah.
At this time, like around 2010.
Admittedly, I don't play a lot of games that would have it, but I only became aware of this as a feature 2 years ago. I think when we were playing Persona, which has it, and I was like, or maybe it was a different game. Well, either way, at one point, and I think it's amazing. I think it's a great decision because it keeps the flow of scenes going without forcing you to sort of like stagger your inputs and shit.
Yep.
It's just good. It's good stuff, and they should definitely do that in this game. Make the touchscreen more useful.
Yeah, if you ever make that remaster,
think about it.
Put that in.
Yep. We need to get on a fucking call with Capcom.
Yeah.
Guys, we have great ideas.
Where's
They're called
check?
Use Your Old Ideas. But yeah, so that's basically all I could possibly say on the controls. I kind of didn't love the ghost and trick buttons being on the bottom corners of the touchscreen. I know that you can do the trick part by pressing one of the face buttons, but is there a button for the ghost, like, go into?
L.
L.
Mm-hmm.
Never did it. That probably would have helped. I probably would have never used the
you could control it all with just buttons.
Interesting. I didn't, but that would have been fun. Yeah, now that minor detail is out of the way, that's probably all we really have on controls. But to talk about how the puzzles are actually designed. So we talked about the one where it felt like actually constructing a Rube Goldberg device. And we talked about the one where it actually used the mechanics to go back in time 2 times and also to change shit around. Mm-hmm. But those are standouts. And the majority of them follow this more sort of linear path where you have to sort of see what the cause and effect of everything is and then see which ways you can go about changing it. Mm-hmm. Did any of those in particular like stand out to you?
Another one that stood out to me was the one in the chicken restaurant.
We're like on the same page on this shit, because this is also what I was going to mention.
I feel like that's the first one that introduces, this is another idea I wish they would have iterated on more, of someone getting a phone call in the middle of it, and you listening into the phone call, and it's like, do you want to go there or stay here? And you have to like make a decision, and you don't know which one is the place you need to go. So I thought that was an interesting mechanic as well that they kind of drop. But like that one felt like the ones that felt like they had more moving pieces were always the ones I liked better. Mm-hmm. And the restaurant had like multiple floors, and then you also had to go outside to the guy in the van, and like it just felt more involved and interesting.
Yeah, the fact that one also has like 2 tiers to it, because you save the dude in the van, but then or you go to the dude in the van and you try and figure out what's happening with that, and then you go back to his death after you realize there's nothing you can do at the restaurant to do that part of it. Mm-hmm. I thought was really cool. That puzzle with the headphones was frustrating and finicky.
Yeah.
But I liked the implementation of it.
Mm-hmm. And I like the part of like messing around in the kitchen too, and like making it like steam up.
Right.
I don't know, something about like that one. Just I liked a lot of the set pieces in that.
Yeah. And that actually is one that did give me that eureka moment, because I was like, I like accidentally triggered the rotating chicken thing and was like, oh, like I just, it like comes to me, that flood of inspiration. I was like, I know exactly what I have to do.
Yeah. I liked it whenever they'd have characters move, and that changed like where the position, like so you could get further of like the little access points, and like those kept cropping up in unexpected ways, like that where the guy would lean back and his hat would go down and then you could reach.
Right, because he keeps hot sauce under his hat.
Yeah,
for some reason.
They were clever with that stuff, I thought.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if now, I guess it's not. This really isn't the time. God, the animation in this game is so good, though. Like, this is the thing that's been eating at me.
Yeah, I didn't know if we should save it for the second half or not.
I feel like we probably should.
Do you want to take a break?
What time is it?
It's been 40 minutes. That's
I think, we should. The animation in this game is real good. And we'll talk about that after the break. Welcome back. Damn it, this game has good animation. So I think that it's been kind of like eating me up inside since we began talking about this, and I've already regret not starting with this as like the opening conversation. I want to get your take on some stuff, but my largest takeaway from this is I don't actually love the art style of this game. I think it is kind of like, I could take it or leave it. Like, it seems very sort of bland to me, the way that everyone is, like, styled.
Mm-hmm.
But the actual, like, modeling and animation of everything in the game is so fluid and gorgeous, and they give it so much personality that I end up loving looking at this fucking thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been probably the most talked about thing about the game. And the way that they achieved it is they actually modeled all the characters in 3D and then rendered them out as 2D sprites.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm not exactly sure what all goes into that. But, yeah, and the result is you end up with, like, higher quality animations faster than you could doing it, like, with just pixel-based sprites.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine it was like they modeled the characters, rigged them, then did like all of the animation stuff. Whereas if you'd done it as an actual 2D sprite, then you would have to sort of like frame by frame everything, and it would have been expensive.
Well, I mean, you still have to frame by frame everything with 3D animation.
That's true, but you have a lot more leeway as far as like automation goes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know about in 2010, but that's my like general assumption about it.
Yeah.
The one that stands out to me is Inspector Cabanela? Cabinella? Is there an Enya?
I think it's
so.
Cabanela.
Yeah.
I think that's how I was saying it in my head anyway.
Yeah, same.
But he seems like a character that was designed and created after they like settled on this method of animation, because like he's always dancing. Same thing with the guitar guy.
Yeah. Who takes the big giant steps.
Yeah, he's always headbanging.
Yeah. And also there's like that whole character whose like exclusive purpose is to freak out and dance.
Oh yeah.
The security guard guy. Which that joke was good once.
Yeah.
And then they did it 3 additional times and
they
stopped being as good. But no, his movements are always, because it's so smooth, like the really exaggerated movements just feel like they're very like, hey, look at me. Like, look at the cool shit we can do. And I don't disapprove of it. Like, it's one of the, I feel like they earned it. It's like in Heavy Rain, how all the loading screens are just like
the faces.
Yeah, all of the faces of the characters, because they wanted basically to show off their animation.
Or the 3D Mario face in the beginning of Mario 64. I actually kind of don't like the Heavy Rain one.
That's fair.
That might just be, in retrospect, they don't look quite as good as they maybe once did.
Well, they're all creepy, like Uncanny Valley also.
Right, but they're putting them up there because they're like, oh, look how impressive and realistic this is. But, like, I think a fun application of it is fun.
It's
like, I don't know how else to say it, but, like, I like it. It feels like it's coming from a genuine place and not like a, hey, look how great we are kind of place.
Yeah. I mean, because it is, like, something that the technique, like, opened up for them, like, to allow them to do these more intricate animations. And so I think it's fair to have a couple of characters whose sole purpose is sort of just to show off the animation in a way.
Take advantage of it.
Yeah. I don't know that the character quirks really added a whole lot as far as, like, the narrative goes. Like, at no point does the fact that he dances everywhere he goes really worked in at all. Like, it's never his downfall, and it never gives him an unseen advantage. It's always just a thing that happens.
Nope. Yeah, it's used for jokes a couple times, but like as the story goes on, he stops doing it.
Well, at one point they break all of his bones.
Wow. Yeah.
It really hinders your ability to dance everywhere. But all of that said, like, it could have been, is kind of my point. We talked before the break about the guy, the chef, who, like, keeps the bottle under his hat, and then the hat tips back, so that he can lean forward and put the sauce on the chicken, and you get to jump to the hat when he does that and then move to other areas. And I feel like with him always taking those big exaggerated steps and thrusting his hips everywhere like Elvis fucking Presley, you could have used that. Like, you can pause the game, and then jump to like his cloak or something.
Yeah, the coat has the long,
the
trench coaty, tail part. Yeah,
I wanted to say a train, but that's like for wedding dresses.
I'm sure there's a word for it, but I can't think of it either.
Yeah, and then have it like carry you to a different location. It would have been a good use of it.
you turn on a fan. Right. And then you jump from the fan to the coat and then to something else.
Right. But all of that being said, I do genuinely like that they gave them these quirks just for the sake of like how interesting. Like when he comes fucking, you don't even know what this game is. Like you're like, here's the introduction tutorial puzzle where you stop the guy with the dumb name, with Nearsighted Joe or whatever.
The blue guy.
Yeah, from shooting Lynn. And then you go down the stairs, and then a dude comes fucking waltzing down all these stairs in this extended sequence, and it's hysterical.
Like he's Willy Wonka or
something. And I feel like it works really well in that sequence. And I appreciate it and wanted it to continue, and it did, fortunately.
They give all the characters little animations too, whether more exaggerated or not. Because you got the Ray, the lamp, who's like constantly moving back and forth.
Right.
You got like Lynn in the restaurant, like eating the chicken, and like all the characters have like little idle animations and stuff. Like they definitely squeeze that animation in there as much as they can.
I will say the one place where I didn't appreciate any of it at all was the curry-loving spoon man, who was so uncomfortable to look at that I could not perform while he was on screen.
I don't even remember this.
He's the guy in the prison
who
squeezes through the toilet into the little tunnel and digs it out with the spoon.
Okay.
Yeah.
That character intrigued the crap out of me.
I did want more explanation.
I kept thinking they were going to do something with that. And then they did a little bit, but barely anything.
Yeah, there's like an after credit sequence where he eats chicken at the chicken restaurant and is reintroduced for that, like, a split second.
Yeah, it's like him with his whole, like, prison escape thing that only you were aware of because of your powers. Seemed like it had interesting like potential for something, but they use him to let you jump between like the basement or like where the electric chair is up to the cells.
Yeah,
because he's in there asleep and whatever. But that's all they really do with it.
Yeah, I do like the like implied storyline. Like, there's a lot of. This is like,
the X's and O's. Like, that's all, like, really, like, it's a cool setup, and it feels like they just kind of like, whatever.
I feel like a lot of the scenes in this game are, like, on the verge of what people in 2010 would self-masturbatorily call environmental storytelling, and this is the one that really, like, jumps the hurdle and becomes, like, you can put together this narrative in your mind of what's going on with the guy taking phone calls, and he goes up, and then like when the guards come in, he puts the O to let him know that it's safe to go back into the tunnel and keep digging. So there's like this combined effort that they have going on, and it's cool, and I like it, but they don't really ever do anything with it or anything ever again.
And I like it because I feel like there's an additional wrinkle of like it just being coincidence. You know, like he's just balling up his calendar and throwing it in there. And
I think it is explicit that they are like in cahoots.
See, I feel like that is a definite, probably the correct reading, but I feel like it's also like, because the spoon guy seems like he's completely lost his marbles.
True.
And that he's just like just these
he's just
X's and O's come through the pipes, and he just takes it as like a sign
right
from like like whatever, like a voice in his head or some shit to just keep digging out of the prison. Like, I don't know. It seemed like maybe it was just like a weird coincidence thing.
I mean, I won't rule it out, but that was not my reading on it.
No, I think you're right, but it just thought that was funny.
Yeah. Well, and that character is just... Well, all of those characters don't really ever get too much of an explanation. It gets explained why they're in prison, but not really anything about who they are or why they are. But they do keep showing up, which is kind of the weird part.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel about the prison break stealth sequence that happens in that area?
I feel like it was one of the only part, because I read a review or two to see what people thought of this at the time, and a lot of them complained about like trial and error puzzle solving, and I found that wasn't really my experience. But that was the one part that really felt like it. Specifically the part where the guards are going up and down the stairs.
Right.
Like, it felt like I had to do all kinds of bullshit, like jumping around and like waiting for him to walk to specific places and trying to drop the guy through the floor to like desync them and shit. Like, I was probably making it harder than it was, but like, I don't know. It felt like that one had too many elements to it.
Yeah. I completely agree with this. And it's this like weird point in the game where they sort of like take the going back to before someone's death, like the 4 minutes before mechanic, as just like an implicit retry, as opposed to like something that you have to actually trigger. And I feel like it makes it very shitty to play through. Like, it does, because it isn't like a regular puzzle where you have all this time and all of the like options available to you at all times. They black it out so you can't look at the screen, and you can only see what's in your immediate vicinity in ghost mode, and all of those other things are happening at the same time, and you just have to pay attention to all the red dots. And like, the end result is a puzzle that isn't really that difficult, but because of all of the moving parts, you're just bound to fuck up, and there are no checkpoints.
It's time consuming.
Yeah. That was probably my least favorite puzzle in the game, even though I was very amused by dropping people through ceilings.
Yeah.
It's just a fun, enjoyable thing to do.
Yeah. I find it hard to fault the game for it too much, because it seems like an obvious, like, thing that you would think to do with the mechanics. But with the game being as short as it is, I think it ends up being a miss, and it just feels like a waste at that point.
Yeah, it feels like an attempt at a difference in kind.
Yeah, that just kind of falls through.
Yeah, a ceiling onto the floor.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that was... We got off the thing about animation real quick accidentally, because I forgot about that. I feel like
we talked about that for a long time.
That's fair.
And then just moved on.
Well, I guess... Okay.
Did you have more to say about it?
Asked and answered. I guess I was going to ask more about your... because I opened by being like, I don't really like the art style, but the animation's real good. Mm-hmm. Specifically on the art, though. Like, was there anything that you found, like, cool and good about it, or particularly bad? Because I find it... I baited the question hoping to maybe there was like an opposing argument, but I do find it just kind of like sort of standard to me.
That makes sense for you.
Okay.
I think the character design's really good in this. I particularly like Lynn's design. Sissel's is weird, but I think it works because he looks like the Flame, like with his hair and everything.
Right.
And I like the red suit.
The red suit's very cool.
Yeah, but overall, like, I think I kind of like this art style a little bit better than Phoenix Wright. But I feel kind of similarly about it. Like, I think it's charming. It leans a little bit more cartoony, and that fits the tone. Like, it's nothing outstanding, but it's good.
Yeah. I think the thing that made me think to come back to it is in that stealth mission. It makes you realize that the purpose of the art style in Phoenix Wright serves or is different. Like the reason that they're styled the way they are is different than the reason that the characters are styled in Ghost Trick, where in Phoenix Wright the character designs were supposed to tell you something about the character because you needed like insight into how they were going to react to things. Whereas in Ghost Trick, they're designed to cut like sort of a unique silhouette. And I do like that. That's probably the thing that I think is most successful about it. Like, you're not ever going to confuse the Ghost World variation of Sissel, a Cabanella, and the Super, because one of them is a big tall guy with stupid hair, one of them has a big trench coat on, and the other one has a pigeon on his head. It's like they're so completely distinct from each other that there's like no chance that you'll like mistake any of them. And the same goes for Lynn. Like, she has like that weird like Spinosaurus.
It's like a bird, I think, like a cockatoo kind of a thing.
Yeah, that makes more sense than the dumb thing I said.
Yeah, it made me think of Skyward Sword because a lot of the characters, like the human characters in Skyloft, are like take visual cues from birds because, you know,
or just named Groose.
Yes. So, and that's just kind of what that made me think of with her hair like that.
That makes sense.
Yeah, Phoenix Wright leans a little bit more just like straight visual novel, and this looks a little bit more like something like The World Ends With You, or it's a little bit more like manga influenced in the way the characters are designed. And I think the fact that they rendered them as 3D models probably affected the design as well. Like, in like the way that, like, you know, it's just the way that it's rendered, I think, affected older games and simpler looking games like on the DS a lot. So I'm sure that played into it a whole bunch.
Oh yeah, the World Ends With You is actually a way better comparison that I didn't really ever think of, as far as like how the visuals in this game sort of look to me. Like, I feel like the designs are similar in like what they're going for, and yeah, no, that's good. I like that.
Like the color palette and the render, like the illustrations of the characters and stuff.
Yeah, this game is only slightly less punk rock than that game. What you got there?
You want to talk about the story?
Yeah, I think that's probably what we should do.
Did you notice that Missile was the name of the dog in Phoenix Wright, and also the name of the dog in this game?
So I did think that, but then didn't look it up and didn't interact with the dog in Phoenix Wright, so I wasn't 100% sure if that was correct. I just assumed. The dog in Phoenix Wright wasn't a Pomeranian, was it?
I can't remember. He might have... No, he was a different kind of dog.
Yeah, like I said,
he was the same color, though, like brown with white.
So there's obviously some continuity here in the canon.
Someone on the team's dog is probably named Missile and is brown and white.
Yeah. Missile is the best character in this game. Also, just as like a side note, none of them... I didn't like most of the characters. Not in like a I thought they were bad characters kind of way, but in like none of them were like particularly likable to me. And Missile was great, and all of his dialogue is hysterical. And that's a super lukewarm take, but he is very well written to, like, the greatest crime against this game is that it came out in 2010 and on a system that does not support native screenshots, because Missile would be the most memed video game image of all time. Probably not, but like it'd be close if it was. But that's not really the story that we're talking about.
No, we can talk about characters though. But yeah, I think this game is overall pretty well written. But I felt like, and I liked Missile, but I felt like he verged on a little bit too cartoony at times. Like, I felt similar ways about Phoenix Wright, whereas like these games have premises that take themselves somewhat seriously, but then they like always feel like they kind of push the line with like how silly they get. And like it's not like a big deal or anything to me, but that always like causes a little bit of friction with me.
Well, there's a sense of like tonal muddling. I feel like this game pulls it off slightly better than Phoenix Wright does.
I do too.
Yeah, like Phoenix Wright is a game that is funny, that has a very serious plot, and because the characters are constantly making jokes, the plot ends up feeling less important because of it, and the things that they care about don't seem as serious as they should in order to move like your interest along. In this game, I feel like the game's plot is outlandish and comic booky, and it meshes a lot better with that like snappy dialogue that's like lots of one-liners. The fact that like people die constantly in this game, like main character Lynn dies like 5 times and it's like a running gag,
and never once does the pain of dying ever come up.
It's a good. Does she ever die in a painful way?
Pretty sure she gets shot.
She does get shot.
She gets crushed. She dies in almost exclusively painful ways.
Well, I see. I'm thinking being crushed, you probably wouldn't, depending on the method of crushing. If you just were crushed, you would just die, and you wouldn't even think about all of your bones being turned into a thin paste.
It's still gotta hurt though for at least a second. And then she gets to persist and actually remember the pain.
Well, maybe not, because they always describe it as erasing the death.
Yeah.
And they don't seem to remember the moment.
They remember dying though.
Yes. Except I forget why Camilla doesn't remember dying. Because she doesn't know that she's been dead when you meet her the first time or the second time.
There is like an explanation. This goes back to your whole rules thing from before. Like there was a reason at the first time she didn't manifest as a core that you could talk to, and there was a reason for it, but I do not remember. And then she dies again.
Right.
And then she has one. You probably can't hear that on the recording.
There have been times you could hear like sirens and shit.
Well, that's a siren.
Yeah.
Like if I had $1 for every podcast I ever listened to where they were like, "Oh, there's a plane. I hope you can't hear it."
Right.
You can never hear it, like ever. Oh yeah, Camilla not being remembering her death. Yeah, I don't remember.
All right.
What the justification is there.
Neither did she.
Yeah. Woo.
Good dodge that one. Yeah, so there are all these like moments where people are killed and you bring them back, and because you can talk to them and like the death doesn't, like you could literally, in the world of Ghost Trick, I could be having a conversation with you, then your eyeballs could explode and you drop dead, and then I can continue the conversation as if nothing happened. And because of that, it makes a lot of like the elements of the plot that in another game would be taken seriously a lot less serious. And I think that is overall a good thing for the tone of the game.
No, I would agree. I think it's largely successful, but I think it's just more of like a personal preference thing. Like given what's there, I would like it to skew just a little bit more like taking the premise seriously.
Yeah. Well, especially considering I think that the not the final twist of the game, but like the twist of getting to the end of the game to be like actually really smart. I like that they use Yomiel's corpse. That is, like he states before, like every time that he dies, he heals back to life, so he never really dies. So when they take the chunk of meteorite out of him and he actually dies.
It's like the Tensik meteor.
Yeah, the Tensik, which means that he has died within the last day and you can use it to go back before his death. I think that is a really intelligent use of the premise in order to like pull the narrative together after putting it felt like they had a plan for that ending and were able to escalate the like action to a point where it was like the relevant and logical thing to do.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't feel like they made up the plot as they went along or anything.
Yeah.
Although I would argue that if you removed the meteor, wouldn't it just take you back to the point where you took the meteor out?
Yeah.
Because then that'd be the point that he would die.
I think that's why they wrote the dialogue in such like a specific and weird way, where he talks about like ping-ponging between life and death.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, because it muddies it just enough that you're like, sure.
It was the moment that he should have died.
Yeah. But I do, yeah, it is, there's definitely a bit of a hole there, but it's obscured.
A meteor-sized hole.
You know, speaking of sequels to this game that should exist, the fact that Detective Jowled...
Yeah, he was probably my favorite character.
He's my guy, for sure. Yeah.
Hashtag my guy.
The fact that he gets a piece of the meteor embedded in his fucking calf at the end of the game feels like there should be like a deeper implication.
It sure does feel like it is a plot thread left dangling.
Mm-hmm. But like not explored in this game, and no sequel ever came. But I feel like that would have been the thing that tied them together if it was.
Ghost Cat.
The
sequel to Ghost Trick.
They couldn't name it something that spoiled the end of this game.
No,
I feel like.
It would be Ghost Trick too, but
yeah, Phantom Cat Detective.
Yeah, Cat Detective.
So anyway, that's the big twist at the end, is that you're a cat. Spoiler alert.
I feel like the twist is handled well, and I think they milk it for a impressively long time. Mm-hmm. Because the fact that like you aren't the person that you look like is something that's introduced like in the middle-ish of the game, and like they don't reveal the actual truth of it till the end. Like they keep you hanging on that for a long time, and you never are able to like guess it.
Yeah.
But it's not like a gotcha kind of twist. Like it actually does make sense.
Yeah, and it's not something that like absolutely redirects the entire plot. Mm-hmm. Like I feel like I am not a writer. And this is not a writing workshop that I'm putting on. But in my mind, a bad twist is one that you don't see coming, and the result of it recontextualizes like it recontextualizes things in a really unintuitive way. Like, I feel like there's a version of this where it's revealed that you're the cat, and then somehow the cat's been doing, like, all kinds of shit behind the scenes for years. And then, like, because you don't have your memories, so you know, but, like, there's, like, a weird, very sentient, very active cat. But the fact that it was just a cat that had absolutely no understanding of the world, and then it happened to be you, plays into what the rest of the game was doing totally without hindering it. Mm-hmm. Of course, the fine line is that the good twist is one that you don't see coming, and it recontextualizes it, but also just in a good way.
Yeah.
Like Shutter Island has a good twist.
Yes. And it makes it still enjoyable to watch on a rewatch. You can pick up all the little hints that were there the whole time. Mm-hmm. It's like a magic trick. It's all about misdirection.
It's like poetry.
It's sort of, they rhyme.
They rhyme.
But anyway, that's the end of the workshop. Yeah. The whole, and I think this ties into like my slight dislike of the whole missile thing, is the fact that you end up being a cat. It's like you end up being a cat, and a dog ended up being the lamp that was like the mastermind behind the whole thing.
Right.
It's like, if I was the director of this game, I would be like, you have to do one or the other. Like, you can't have both Missile be the mastermind and you be a cat.
Right. I think...
But that's my own personal preference.
So I don't love the Missile reveal at the end, like where he is Ray. And most of the reason I don't love it is because, one, old Missile doesn't yell like single line dialogue.
Miss Camilla a million times.
Yeah.
Old Missile was very funny though.
Like
that design,
visually?
yeah, the design was great.
Yeah, it was. But the second reason is because his whole spiel at the end about how everything worked did not click with me in any way. Like, he kept explaining these steps, and I kept being like, does this make sense? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do have a secret theory as to why it ends up the way that it does.
Is it a game theory?
Thanks for watching. You can get a hold of us. There are three characters who we see their ghost powers, and they're a cat, a dog, and a human being, and all three of them have different ghost powers.
It depends on
your species. That's what I'm guessing. People can control people because people do that in real life, and cats control objects because they like to like bat things and knock, like they can't just leave anything be.
And dogs like to move things around.
Like it's a fetch retrieval thing. This is my game theory.
That's not bad. It's not bad.
I was like,
I like it.
That I probably is why I didn't understand the very ending of the game,
because I was like, no, it leans into that kind of. Like, we kind of brushed up and got talking about, like, anime tropes a little bit, but that kind of, like, it was my... It's also, like, a comic booky thing, too. But, like, it was my grand plan the whole time. You see, like, way back before any of this happened, I was smart enough to know this and that, and so I put this and that into motion, and then I waited 10 years, and then, like... it tries a little bit too hard to be, like, like the... omniscient one in the background that knew everything the whole time kind of thing.
Yeah. It also sort of puts that like sense of inevitability on everything
and I kind of feel like it doesn't make any sense for it to be Missile because I mean he's written and portrayed very well as like a dog.
Yes.
He speaks in English and you can understand him, but his personality, it's like a Doug from Up.
Yeah.
It's like he feels like a dog the whole time. I don't think he'd be smart enough to pull off this plan,
right.
Just as a dog. So I think that was a little, it brushed up on a little bit too goofy for me with all of that stuff, but I don't think I would change it.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even know what to change.
No, me neither, but like, it is endearing and I do kind of like it, even though I have problems with it.
Yeah. I did have, like, because this is part of the mystique of writing a mystery is where you have to have the player is going to be attempting to figure stuff out before you reveal it, so you have to be really careful about what you reveal. Basically I guess you would want somebody who is very closely paying attention to all the details to be able to figure it out, but the majority of people not to.
I've read that there are actually a lot of little hints that Sissel is a cat throughout the whole thing.
Interesting.
Like the way that he, like, the stuff that he says and things. Like, if you play it knowing the twist, like, you're like, oh, I get it. Kind of a thing.
Yeah, because they do
like
talk
illusions.
about things that... The thing that came to my mind was that there are moments where he doesn't know words, and people are like, how do you not know these words? Etc., etc. And I couldn't remember what any of the words were that he didn't know at the end, so I wasn't able to, like, cross-reference the information. But... I can see that being a thing. But Missile being Ray felt like something no one could ever guess.
No. It's I think the best twists are the kind, that, as I said, it's like a magic trick. It's something that was actually there that somebody, if they were really paying attention, could pick up on. But through the way it's introduced in the story, it kind of diverts your attention away from the important part so that, like, you don't figure it out and then it moves on. And then later you're able to go back and be like, oh, it was there the whole time, but I didn't notice because of this and that, because of how the story was told. So those are the best kinds of twists. And Missile being Ray is not at all set up but I think it works anyway.
Sure.
But, it's not super strong.
Well, there was really no other option,
Exactly,
I think, at that point. It either is Ray or it's nothing.
Or it's like something for a sequel, like it's something that you don't actually tie into the story.
Or maybe Ray's parents were junk traders.
Yeah, but that's the real question, is who are Ray's parents? But yeah, I was like the whole time up until the end, but I'm like, who the fuck was Ray? Like, he's not come back up the whole game. Like, what are they going to do with that?
I expected you to be inherently distrustful and assume Ray was the villain the whole time.
If Ray had a little bit more of a presence, but he's like just like in the tutorial and then never comes back.
Yeah.
If he had come back, he would have been the villain.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One other thing on Missile before we drop out of that conversation.
Yeah, I hope I didn't shit on him too much, because I do like Missile.
Yeah. I think there's a missed opportunity, because when he comes up and he swaps the leaf and the big giant thing, he's like, it's like, here's how I got here. And he jumps into the door, and then he opens the door, and then he runs to the park, and then he gets hit by a guy on a scooter. Mm-hmm. And I get that they had to set up the whole thing with the Temsik radiation, where he had to die in the presence of the meteor in order to get his powers. Mm-hmm. But it would have been, and this is cruel, I guess, but like just so unendingly funny to me, is if he just jumped into the door like one more time than you saw in the like cutscene, and it just killed him. Like he just jumped into the door repeatedly and just died from doing that. Like, it really would have driven home what a dumb idiot he was.
That is pretty black humor.
But it's still humor.
It is, yes.
That's what I have on that.
I don't want to leave it to the very end this time, but the music in this
slaps.
It does, and I think similarly to Phoenix Wright, it carries a lot of weight in the game, like more so than a lot of other series. The music cues are really on point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't quite hit the level of the objection theme in Phoenix Wright as far as like that moment where it kicks in, but it comes really close. For me, it's the music they end up playing during the credits, which is like the revelation music. Mm-hmm. That's really upbeat, and also this is weird, but the save theme that just it sounds like a PBS like. But these are our sponsors kind of like jingle. Both serve a purpose like emotionally, and I think they both hit the mark really well. Mm-hmm. And the rest of the music is just like good.
Yeah. They use it to like pick up some of the slack because it is a handheld game. Like, I think this team is super good at that. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things I don't think you can fully appreciate unless you like saw a worse version of it.
Yeah, that's actually true. This is something that I've definitely become more like prescient of. That's not a phrase that you say. I've become a lot more aware of it when I'm playing games now since ever before. Uh-huh. Where I feel like the timing of music is so important compared to like just the quality of the music. And I think prior to like a couple years ago, I was just like, I didn't love the music. I thought this song was cool because it had like this cool beat or whatever to it. Mm-hmm. But the way that this game sort of layers its soundtrack to like cue important moments and things that the player should take notice of, I wouldn't have noticed this if I played it 5 years ago, and I thought it was exceptionally well done.
Yeah, it's like where the soundtrack meets the sound design. Mm-hmm. It's like how it's spaced out and edited, and like when it plays, etc., etc. Like that slight moment of silence before the dun 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 in a Pokemon game. It just makes it stand out more. Yeah. No, did I actually leave the music till last, even though I didn't want to?
No, I think I've got I have one other thing that ties a little bit into all of this. It feels like a capstone sort of conversation to me. so you can jump in if you had anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like the thing that this game does exceptionally well, that I was tempted to mention earlier, but I feel like we needed to get sort of like the plot and everything out of the way first, is that I think this game is pretty expertly paced, because we've talked about a lot of games at this point. This is episode like 95 or something.
Yeah, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah, and often we complain when a game feels too short or too long, and I think we do a good job of praising when games run their length and are good at that length, and I think that this game is one of those. I think that the story, well, I didn't like, we mentioned this a little bit when we were talking about the plot. I feel like the story didn't quite like, it wasn't enrapturing to me, but I think that it was still good and the writing was really good. So to the point where I felt like the places where I stopped playing, I felt like were natural places to stop playing, and the places that I was like really into it and wanted to keep going to the next thing were put in really good parts. Like the last 4 chapters felt like they went by pretty quickly, even though they were longer than previous chapters, because you get that like coming up to the revelation of the mystery, and the game didn't overstay its welcome. And at a 12-hour game on a handheld system, that actually surprises me. Like, I feel like that's very uncommon.
I mean, I don't know if I really have much to disagree with or to add to that. Yeah, like this game, it goes down smooth, to put it a different way. It's easy to just keep playing, and there's stopping points after every chapter because it's a handheld game, and they designed it with that in mind so that you could just stop and start between chapters really easily. So if you want to play it that way, you can do that too. Like it's just, there aren't a lot of like barriers. Like the puzzles are a little on the easier side, so you aren't getting stuck. It's just a pretty smooth experience. And as you said, yeah, like the story isn't amazing, but I think the story and the gameplay really prop each other up. Like when one thing might not be doing it for you so much, the other thing is.
Mm-hmm.
So it just keeps you, it pulls you through.
Yeah, I guess there wasn't really a whole lot of additional things to say on that one.
Yeah.
I can't really like name a specific example of something that like that indicates how well the game is paced, because like sort of by the nature of what pacing is, like it all kind of flows together well.
I mean, you could, as a counter example, you could throw up something like Danganronpa.
Oh, which is paced horribly?
See, I wouldn't agree with that necessarily, but like it's laid out or designed in such a way that it feels longer than it is.
Yeah.
And it's like playing a whole bunch of it at once feels like kind of exhausting.
Yeah, I think speaking specifically about V3, just in case anyone, because that's the one that we played, the game opens with what it thinks is like a cool, like as they refer to it themselves, a cold open, where it's just like a whole thing, a whole story from beginning to end, and then it picks up like the first chapter of the game is Danganronpa, and then the second one is Danganronpa 2. Mm-hmm. Like it feels like a sequel to itself, but it's like this more contained thing. Mm-hmm. But that takes 6 hours. Not really. It takes probably like 2 to 3 hours. Mm-hmm. But it takes several hours.
But it feels like 6
hours. And then so it feels like you do this sprint or this marathon sprint, and then you go into the actual game, and it becomes exhausting because you've already expended a bunch of your energy in that opening bit. This game doesn't. This game builds really effectively.
Yeah, I think it's about the presentation too. Like Danganronpa throws a lot at you, and this it feels more like calculated, and it's well designed, it's well paced, and yet the easiest way to appreciate it is to compare it to other narrative focused games. Like there are plenty of them that have been paced poorly, and that makes this one stand out, I think, even more.
Yeah. I liked the fact that there were a lot of characters in this game, but I feel like the ones that were actually important and given the most narrative weight weren't detracted from in order to build up like minor characters. Like you said, like nothing ever comes of Curry Guy, and it shouldn't because he doesn't really play a role.
No, he has no lines.
Yeah, but he is introduced and he has like a backstory and you can learn about it, and then it's just over, and then you're focused on Jowd after that. And I think that's just a good way of handling an ensemble cast.
Yeah, I mean, I think I talked about it, and I keep referencing Phoenix Wright, but
I mean, it's the best point of comparison for this.
But I talked about on that one how it feels like this team is just really good at designing for handhelds, for limitations. And so it really feels like everything is really well considered and designed with like a smaller budget and a more limited hardware in mind, and they craft like really interesting standout games for the platform.
Do we have final resting thoughts?
Phantom thoughts?
Phantom thoughts. Final thoughts, but spelled PHINAL.
Yeah, so I liked this game a lot. I actually think I like it more than Phoenix Wright. It's a little bit like briefer, and whereas like Phoenix Wright, I think like the biggest thing I had against it was it felt a little bit too long. Yeah, so this I think was paced a bit better, and I like the mechanical interaction of it. I feel like that was paced with the story really well. Yeah, like it's charming. It's got a lot of the same strengths. It's charming. It's funny. It's it's got that kind of like a trademark of like this director and this team. It just has that like feel of like if you've played Phoenix Wright, you'll be right at home with this. I think it's really creative. It's just I feel like it's kind of a shame that this didn't do as well. Because I would really love to see another one. And I know that they commented on wanting to do like a crossover game with Phoenix Wright.
I read this too.
Yeah, and it's like that would be a really good fit, and it would be a way to give this series another shot. Because if that game sold well off of the Phoenix Wright name, they could do another Ghost Trick potentially. So, but I mean, that was years ago that quote was taken, so it looks like it's not going to happen, but... yeah, really enjoyed this. I think it's definitely a hidden gem given how like little I've ever heard about this game.
Yeah,
it's a shame.
I do feel like I've only heard about this from like 2 other places before actually playing it myself. So, in defense of Phoenix Wright.
Oh yeah, I don't want to put down Phoenix Wright. That's a good game. I was just surprised how much I preferred this, given that it's like nobody's heard of this game.
Yeah. What I was going to say is Phoenix Wright felt too long a lot because the remastered version has that extra chapter that takes forever on the end of it. And this game obviously doesn't have that kind of a thing. That being said, I probably not surprisingly, if you've listened to both episodes, I very much prefer this game to Phoenix Wright. I feel like a lot of the things that it tickles different parts of my brain as far as like the actual puzzle solving in both go, but even with that aside, I feel like Ghost Trick plays up a lot of the strengths that Phoenix Wright has up to like a higher level. The selling point of this game is that it is like a very unique mechanical experience, and I agree with that. I think that I like the way that the puzzles play out. I liked fucking around with things in like the Freddy Fish style of like, what does this do? You hit it does plays a little animation. You're like, except you actually have to catalog that and use it later in a puzzle. I thought all of that was very cool. I enjoyed myself going through this mechanically. And if I had complaints, it's that the checkpoint system is a little questionable because you have to repeat animations and stuff, and the game gets a little wordy at times. But other than that, I have very little to say that isn't positive about this. So, do recommend
Hashtag would recommend.
Yeah, 8 out of 10. IGN.com. My mind was blown.
You will not believe. Click on the link below to read more.
Put a big red arrow in the thumbnail.
Big circle, big red arrow pointing to missile.
Mm-hmm. This will shock you. Thank you for listening to NOCLIP this week.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time, we're going to be talking about Kentucky Route Zero because we don't know if it will come out during the mystery month or not.
Nancy June. TM.
On the chance that it does, it is a pretty mysterious game.
Yeah, it's interesting enough to do outside of Nancy June, but also totally fits within it. So who knows where it'll land.
It's a coin flip. Until that time, you can get a hold of us. All of our contact information is on our website at noclippodcast.com or on splattershot.pro. There you can find all of our contact information, our links to our Twitter, our YouTube, find episodes about fucking Phoenix Wright. We just did that last year. It was a good time. Dan was on it.
Yep. Other mystery games. We did Danganronpa, Detective Pikachu.
Gallows that Detective Pikachu.
Etc. etc. It's a pretty entertaining episode, actually.
Yeah, it's got a good title as well. It's the Phoebus one. Spoilers. They're Phoebus in the game.
Possess that subscribe button so that you can ring that bell.
Ring the bell so that the guy gets a little exclamation point above his head and walks over to take a look at it. And then what he looks at is a sick episode of the NOCLIP podcast. Then he'll subscribe to.
If he gets an X shows up, he goes over, puts his headphones on, and listens to the NOCLIP podcast. If he gets an O, then he subscribes to the NOCLIP podcast.
It's good either way.
If he gets an X and an O, he rings that bell. Welcome to Capcom.
Welcome to Capcom. I'm Cap Brother Com.
I'm Cappy Comic.
That's so good.
And do you mean dumb?